The Woodward tapes, what the President of the United States was saying in private while he downplayed the coronavirus in the early days. Fire in the sky, apocalyptic scenes out of San Francisco as the wildfires out there rage. And it's back to football. This strange NFL season is finally here. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, September 10th. I am Carlo Versano, and I am here once again with my good buddy Baker Machado, filling in for Jill this week. Baker, what's up, man?
Happy Thursday, Carlo Versano. I'm so happy we have not been canceled so far in the week that I've been here for Jill Wagner.
I have a feeling today
Today's the issue. Today's the episode. It finally happens.
I'm pretty livid this morning. I'm going to try and take it easy.
You know what's so funny? We are probably a good, 10 miles apart from each other, but I can feel the seething rage coming from the screen right now. I can already see it.
I gotta be careful because people get upset when I get upset because it's early in the morning and we don't want to spoil anybody's day. But
Carlo,
sometimes the news dictates that, you know.
Totally. We have to make people feel good. So let's get to the story I'm sure is what's driving your rage this morning, Carlo, and I'm sure for other people in this country. Let's talk about the book that has taken Washington by storm. The Pulitzer-winning veteran Bob Woodward has written a new book that presents one of the most scathing portraits of the Trump presidency so far. And that's saying something because there's been over 1,200 books written about the Trump presidency. Now, Bob Woodward spoke to many White House insiders on the record, on tape, too, including President Trump, who told Bob Woodward back in February, Carlo, that he realized how deadly the coronavirus was. And at the time, Trump was saying in public, of course, that the virus was less deadly than the flu. He was really tamping down expectations. Now, those conversations, as I mentioned, completely on tape. A lot of us have already heard those recordings already. Now, the president yesterday trying to do a little bit of cleanup duty on this. He appeared to acknowledge that he purposely downplayed the virus in public because he said he wanted to show confidence. He didn't want to scare any of us. Carlo, let's start off with just that so far. What are your initial reactions to the pretty big revelations from Bob Woodward's book?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the first thing, I mean, the president wanted to show confidence. I don't even know what that means. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, the virus isn't some sort of like foreign adversary, right? It's a pathogen. You don't have to do the whole like we're standing up and not trying to cause a panic. He didn't want to upset the stock market, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. He was worried that if he came out and said anything that was going to scare people, that the stock market would go down. I just want to be clear about what this is because I don't know if the media is doing a very good job of explaining it. This is the president of the United States deliberately on tape undermining the national security of this country. Full stop. That's it, right? So let's just go back to February for a second when these comments to Bob Woodward were made. Baker, you remember, right? We were walking around thinking this was a problem in China. Mm-hmm. We weren't doing anything different, right? We're talking about, February, even early March. We were just whistling past the graveyard in this country. We had no idea it was airborne, for one thing. And according to Bob Woodward and this book, the president had intelligence directly from China. He heard directly from the president of China, as well as his own national security advisors and the CDC, who were all telling him, this is about to be a disaster. This is the biggest test of your presidency. This is the biggest national security threat of your presidency. And he was going out publicly saying it was nothing. It was no big deal. This thing would, quote, disappear. Now, we've all been operating under this assumption that everybody, including the people in charge, right, didn't see this thing coming until mid-March when it was already too late. And look, this is just that we know this is just not true now. I think that's the headline that sort of, if you take anything away from these revelations, they knew before they were letting on how serious this was. So just imagine what maybe would have happened if Trump came out and did an Oval Office address, around Valentine's Day or, mid-February. And he said, look, this virus is here. It's in this country. It is extremely contagious. We need to prepare, right? It's going to spread. So people need to start wearing masks. They need to start social distancing. We've got to stop these indoor gatherings. How many lives of the 190,000 Americans who died in the last 7 months, how many lives would have been saved if he did that in February when he was essentially saying that much to this journalist, Bob Woodward? If he even just came out and said, look, there's airborne transmission. We know that this thing is airborne. How many lives could have been saved? I mean, It's so easy, Baker, to get worked up about every friggin' thing these days, right? And I try not
Yes.
to do it, but this is beyond the pale. If you work in the White House and you allowed this to happen and you didn't say anything, knowing that the intelligence was out there that this virus was as bad as as we know it is, shame on you, shameful.
Well, Carlo,
You should be ashamed of
Carlo,
yourself.
it puts into context, President Trump, why did he decide to do his rally in Tulsa if he knew back in February that this was a deadly virus, that it was worse than the flu? If you're just going off of his assumption that he didn't want to panic everybody, why hold rallies? Why not go out and wear a mask? All of those things. Now, I do all legitimate questions.
But here's the problem with that, right? Trump, the whole Trump thing about how, like, oh, I didn't want to create a panic. Give me a break. That's all the guy does is create panics. Like what upsets me is the people around him, the people like the chief of staff, the vice president, the so-called adults in the room who are supposed to sort of be like the shadow, people running this country. You people should go to your grave knowing that you could have saved lives and didn't do it because of cowardice. This is beyond politics. This is a dereliction of duty. You work for us. Right? The presidency isn't just some grift for you and your buddies to make your rich friends richer. You're supposed to protect us. That's the only thing you're supposed to do. That's the only job you have.
Carlo, by the way, two interesting things with this. One, Bob Woodward continues to really do these really hard-hitting books on President Trump and other presidents as well. It's not like he's just going after President Trump. He has written famously about the Obama years, the George W. Bush years. Karl Rove, the former senior advisor to George W. Bush, went on Fox News yesterday, and he said every president talks to Bob Woodward and then they learn to regret it right afterwards. Yeah. And it's not like this is new to President Trump. Bob Woodward already did a book on Trump early on in his presidency already, so it's not like he didn't know that this was coming. But I do want to get to something that we were talking about off air earlier, is the pushback that Bob Woodward has been getting. If he knew in February about President Trump downplaying the coronavirus, why not report it then? Well, we don't know a lot of specifics because Bob Woodward's waiting for his big 60 Minutes interview this Sunday, but he did have a conversation, a short one, with Margaret Sullivan at the Washington Post yesterday addressing this exact issue, and his response was, it took me a while just to fact check and believe what President Trump was even saying in February, because at the time I couldn't confirm if that was exactly true, and he didn't know where President Trump was getting his information at the time. And you have to remember, Bob Woodward did 19 interviews over the course of 9 hours with President Trump, so there's a lot of information there. The other thing Bob Woodward said, which I think might upset some people, including you as well, his whole thesis is he doesn't want to do a daily story. He wants to basically publish something in history that gives people information heading up to the election. I know that's not going to sit well with a lot of people, but the fact that he said he still needed to fact check and he couldn't believe what the president was saying is one of the reasons why he waited so long.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to belabor that. He's a book author. Like, that's what they do.
That's what they do.
Book authors, they gather information for a book and then they publish the book. I mean, the thing that I don't really understand about what he's saying is this is not some like deeply reported thing. This is the president on tape saying this to him. Right. Like, if he had come out and given those tapes to the Washington Post in February or March, would that have made a difference? That's a great question. But back to your point about Bob Woodward. Again, this is Bob Woodward of Woodward and Bernstein, right? This guy's been around for forever. I don't know what brain surgeon in the White House had the bright idea to let President Trump speak to Bob Woodward on the record 19 times. But like you said, I mean, he writes exposés of sitting presidents. Mm-hmm. That's what the guy does.
Mm-hmm. And every president, every president at the end of the day regrets it when Bob Woodward is the #1 bookseller in the entire country, and there's this terrible story that now they're having to defend about something that happened with them.
Someone tell me if I'm overreacting, please. I'm curious. Like, what is the Fox News defense of this? I don't know, but I want to hear it. Like, I know we have some listeners who are Trump supporters, which is cool and great, and I love you guys all. But I want to hear from you if you think that I'm wrong here, because I literally, like, if I had a hard time falling asleep last night thinking about this. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of people. I mean, Baker, you and I spent the spring in this city when it was just all you heard outside were ambulances all day. and all night, all of these businesses that have gone under. This is a catastrophe. And the idea that the people who are in charge and supposed to be protecting us knew it was about to be as bad as it was and sat on that information is just.
One side note from the book, by the way, there were many myriads of different revelations in this book that were reported by the Washington Post and CNN yesterday. My favorite one, however, was apparently somebody had asked Jared Kushner, what is a good sort of way to prepare yourself for working inside the Trump White House? And he apparently tells people to read Alice in Wonderland because every day is a different adventure. But of course, this is not
Looking Glass.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously this is not going to be the end of this conversation. And Bob Woodward, apparently in his interview with 60 Minutes on Sunday, has more audio tape that he is going to be revealing for his book that is coming out next week. Carlo, I do want to switch gears and talk about the terrible, awful wildfires that are happening out west, especially northeast of San Francisco. Those fires have exploded in size, growing some 250,000 acres a day, and it's forcing tens of thousands of residents to flee their homes. The smoke from the Bear Fire mixed with fog, casting downtown San Francisco in this crazy apocalyptic orange glow. You've probably seen some of the photos on your Instagram. Now, the town of Paradise, which was destroyed in the state's worst fire 2 years ago, once again getting threatened by all of this. That town can just not catch a break. At least 7 people have died so far in those fires across California, Oregon, and Washington, and fierce winds are expected to continue to drive the unprecedented infernos. Residents, by the way, in San Francisco posted ominous photos, as I mentioned, all across social media. You were seeing photos of the Golden Gate Bridge. You were seeing the skyline. Just terrible, terrible, scary photos, Carlo.
Yeah, those photos are insane. My brother is in San Francisco, and I was talking to him yesterday. He says people are just kind of like walking around bewildered, taking pictures, don't really know what to do with themselves. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, maybe this was dumb, but I was curious yesterday could there be a point when there's just nothing really left to burn, and these fires kind of peter out? And that's probably an ignorant thought to have, but I had it, so I looked into it, and it's indeed a stupid thought. So there's about 33 million acres of forest land in California, and we're talking about less than 500,000 that are currently on fire. Right. So I don't know if anybody else had that thought, but. Anyway, it's not like these things can just burn themselves out.
But I mean, there is a kernel of truth to your hypothesis, because every year, Carlo, it seems like these fires get worse and worse and worse. I couldn't think that they could have gotten worse than they did last year, and last year was terrible, especially for my friends in Southern California. So to think that potentially this could get even worse than it is now. And what else could potentially be left at that point, I think yes, it might be ignorant per se to say that, but I think there is a level of curiosity there that I agree with.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing is, especially for us in like the Northeast, when we don't really deal with this kind of thing, is you picture these as like these forest fires, right? It's not really that. It's more like this underbrush and these sort of like these plains and and sage and all this kind of like it's not really like forests that are catching on fire, right? It's more of this. I'm not a forest management person, so I don't really know what to exactly call it, but it's like that's the kind of stuff that can, it grows back and then it burns again. So it's not like the land is just burned and then it's, it doesn't burn again.
My hope is that, and Gavin Newsom was saying this in his press conferences the last couple of days, much of this is caused by humans. Some of this is reckless stuff. We saw just a few days ago, one of the fires was started by a gender reveal party. So my hope is that someday people just realize just how dangerous some of the things they do could cause something like this, and that over time they realize that they've got to stop being so reckless when it comes to this, Carlo. Yeah. All right, I want to talk to the pandemic again, Carlo. Here in New York City, we got some pretty good news yesterday. The restaurants here in New York City will be able to resume indoor dining, but only at 25% capacity, and that's starting at the end of this month on September the 30th. No doubt a significant milestone for the one-time epicenter of the pandemic. We've now kept our infection rates well below 1% for weeks, but Governor Cuomo has been pretty cautious in terms of new things that he's basically allowed us to do, from indoor dining to movie theaters to gyms to all these other things. And the big worry, Carlo, for friends of mine that work in the restaurant industry is they had this original deadline of October the 30th where they were not allowed to do outdoor dining at all. That was basically the end of the deadline, and they had no sort of guidance from the city city or from the state on what to do after October the 30th. So a lot of these restaurants were telling their employees, we don't know if there's going to be work for you after the end of October because we just don't know what's going to be happening here, even though the virus transmission levels are very, very low here in New York State compared to other parts of the country who have pretty much larger indoor policies when it comes to people being inside.
Well, I understand the caution about indoor dining, especially because when you think about New York City restaurants, like you're talking about, these tiny, cramped, really like the perfect breeding ground for an airborne virus, right? Everyone's drunk and yelling and talking and laughing. So I really do get why they're so cautious about it. My wife made this point yesterday that, a lot of New York City restaurants, 25% capacity, that could mean that you're the only person in there, right? There's plenty of restaurants in my neighborhood where there's literally like 5-6 tables. But look, anyway, I think any little thing they can do will help. These places are hanging by a thread without any help from the federal government on the way anymore. So yeah, this is, and it's also just like you said, it's a significant milestone. Just shows you how far that we've come in this city. But I'll tell you, on the outdoor dining thing, I've said this to Jill in the past. Like, I think one thing that we should do this fall, we got to get more like the Europeans and just get cool with putting on our parkas and our scarves and having our coffee outside.
Yes.
Drinking outside. Like that's so maybe we'll be able to do that well into the winter if we just
Listen,
sort of
I'm fine
up.
with that. The sad part, and I understand why, but this because they obviously don't want people congregating inside restaurants. Bar service is not allowed in any of the indoor dining. So for me, that's sad because I miss going to bars and getting a cocktail. But you also know restaurants, they make so much of their money from liquor right now because they basically break even, if even that, on food. They make most of their revenue from basically overcharging you on your cocktails. So yes, they're going to be hit from not having all that extra money from cocktail service at the bar.
I gotta say, Baker, I would gladly pay $17 for I don't know what, like a Moscow Mule, some overpriced.
Carlo, a month ago, Carlo, my husband and I were walking around and somebody was doing outdoor bar service and I hadn't had like a drink in like 6 months at a bar. And I was like, this is going to be the greatest, most liberating feeling ever because I've been having to make my own cocktails, which are not good whatsoever.
It's not the same. It's got to be from it's got to be a cute bartender and, maybe you're flirting a little bit.
Totally.
I will never again after this complain about the prices of drinks in New York City anymore.
No, me neither. Let's talk about the retail beat now, Carlo, and what we call here at Cheddar the retail apocalypse, because it is real. JCPenney has reached a deal to sell its stores and remaining assets to 2 mall operators, Simon and Brookfield Properties. They're essentially averting a liquidation at the once popular department store chain, and it's a little unclear right now, Carlo, what these mall companies plan to do with all of those giant JCPenney stores. But I think the idea is that they could be distribution or fulfillment centers, maybe even for Amazon. They've been rumored to be interested in a lot of that space from JCPenney. Now, separately, the luxury giant LVMH is also pulling out of their planned acquisition of Tiffany & Co., citing the tariffs on French goods from the United States, Carlo.
Somebody made the point yesterday, I think a reporter for Axios, that this is the first time that the Trump's tariffs have actually impacted a building or a business that does business in a Trump Tower, which is Tiffany.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that.
I don't know how true that is, but I thought it was interesting. So look, brick and mortar retailers, whether you're Tiffany or Penny, you're either struggling or you're altogether bankrupt. Meanwhile, e-commerce continuing to boom. Amazon says it now has 33,000. Think about that, 33,000 salary job openings across the company. And a lot of those are legit 6-figure, like big time jobs, in sectors like cloud computing. So yeah, this is just, we've said this a million times now, but the pandemic just accelerating these trends in the retail sector, right?
But on the Amazon front, on this, an acquisition from JCPenney to Amazon, I think it makes so much sense, mainly because Amazon wants to basically shrink that last mile of delivery as much as humanly possible. This is why they're investing in drone delivery, one-day delivery, all of this. You could envision a scenario, Carlo, down the road where Amazon takes all these old JCPenney's in every mall across America, and then all of a sudden your Amazon delivery is delivered in the next few hours instead of,
That's
in the
the
next
idea,
day or
yeah.
so. And also, an acquisition of JCPenney helps them on the clothing front as well. They've wanted to get into the fashion sector for so long. But listen, you got to do something with those giant tenants, because they have dragged down malls so much. When all of a sudden there's no Sears, JCPenney's, any of those places at all, that hurts malls so much, because those are the anchor tenants there.
Exactly. I was just about to say that, because I think my bet is that Simon and Brookfield took some sort of loss on this acquisition, and are just doing it because they cannot afford to have these gigantic empty spaces in malls. Right? The mall scene in this country is already a disaster to begin with. It's just not a good look to have your anchor tenants vacant. Right? So I think they're just like, we'll take them over and we'll figure out what to do with them later.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's going to the mall for Stamp World. Everybody else wants something else there, Carlo. I do want to talk about something that's a little bit more in my wheelhouse, and it's the Oscars. As the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, they're getting both praise and criticism after they unveiled their new diversity and inclusion rules for any film that wants to be considered for Best Picture at the Oscars. So, Carlo, starting in 2024, movies will have to meet certain requirements for both on-screen and behind-the-scenes roles that are filled by people from underrepresented groups. Now, some of the pushback that the Oscars have been getting really have been coming from actresses like Kirstie Alley. She slammed the rules as dictatorial and anti-artist. This, of course, why the Academy says that they're trying to reflect the diversity in Hollywood. Carlo, I remember a few years ago when I was still a young reporter in Hollywood, the fiasco that was the Oscars So White situation that happened for the Oscars. It was terrible for the Oscars. It was the worst public relations that they could possibly get, and that's including Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway accidentally naming the wrong movie instead of Moonlight for Best Picture. Listen, the Oscars have tried really hard over the last few years to really sort of correct that. This upcoming year, they're going to have 10 films now for the Best Picture nomination race, which is great, because now all of a sudden you're allowing more independent, more diverse films get nominated for Best Picture. And you might remember just a few years ago, Frances McDormand in her acceptance speech when she won Best Actress for 3 Billboards over Missouri, she said, listen, these studios have to have these inclusion writers to basically force them to hire women, hire people of color, hire all these underrepresented groups to make the films more representative of the people that are watching them. And I feel like this is a good hit for the Oscars, because it's putting in motion the rules, but they still have 4 years to do it. And it's also important to note the production studios only do this confidentially. They don't have to say who the names of these people or anything. They can just say, listen, we hired X amount of people of color, X amount of LGBTQ people, this amount of this, and that helps them certify that they've basically met those qualifications.
Well, I mean, I think that and you're more read in on this stuff than I am, so I appreciate your what you're saying, and I think that adding making the category so you can have more movies in it, it's totally cool. I'm actually in the minority. I'm coming at you with the. I'm coming at you with the hot takes today, Baker. But
I love this.
I'm in the minority among sort of self-styled progressives here. But I just think that it's a little bit ill thought out. And I'm all for diversity initiatives in a lot of industries when they're needed to even the playing field. And Hollywood probably is one of those. But there's something about when it has to do with art that really rubs me the wrong way. And maybe that makes me old-fashioned. But I just have this sort of baseline belief that art should be judged on its merits alone, in the same way that I didn't think it was smart when we started pulling offensive episodes of old TV shows. I didn't think it was smart when they took down Gone with the Wind and put the statement in front of it about how it was racist. It's not a perfect analogy, and maybe I'm being a masochist here, but write in and tell me why I'm an idiot. I don't mind. There's something about do this stuff with art that I just don't. It doesn't sit well.
The other criticism that the Academy is getting is they're only doing this, Carlo, for Best Picture. They're not doing this for the other categories. And we know how bad the Oscars have been, let's just say, in the director category. Only one woman has ever won in that category, and they haven't had a female nominated in the director category for many, many, many years right now. So it is a systemic problem, not just in the Best Picture category, but across the board. So the problem the Academy is going to have to face here is, yes, maybe they're being more diverse when it comes to Best Picture, but there's still so many holes that they got to fill when it comes comes to the actress nominations, the actor nominations, the writing, the directing, all that stuff. So my criticism, I'm happy and thrilled that they're doing this, but my requirement would have been make it more broad. Expand it so that way more people are able to get into other categories that are underrepresented.
It just seems to me like it seems like window dressing. If they really wanted to, they being Hollywood, if they really wanted to do something meaningful in terms of diversity and inclusion, the studio system should make it easier for movies from underrepresented groups to get made, right?
Totally.
Fund them,
yes.
greenlight them, develop that talent.
The money is a big
and
part,
if the movie's
right.
good, it'll be nominated for Best Picture.
Right.
That's sort of a real, meritocracy argument, but that's sort of where I stand.
The thing I would add to this, and we'll talk about football here in a second, the last thing I'll add on this, Carlo, is the hope is now that we're in a streaming sort of world right now, and a lot of these major theater companies and production houses own streaming networks, and now that the Academy is allowing streaming films now to be up for some of these awards at the Oscars, maybe you'll see a larger swath of more diverse films now that normally probably wouldn't have been nominated in the past because they're now on Netflix and Hulu and all that other stuff, which is of course great. I do want to talk, because we're running out of time, Carlo, about football, because we're finally ready for it. The NFL season kicking off tonight. Defending champion Kansas City hosting the Houston Texans. Now, interestingly, because now we're in this pandemic world, only 15,000 fans are going to be in attendance tonight at Arrowhead Stadium for the 8:20 p.m. Eastern kickoff time. That, of course, I'll be in bed at that when this is going on. This, of course, is happening on ABC. And it's interesting because 15,000 fans seems like a lot. It's because my Denver Broncos just announced just a few days ago they're only filling Mile High Stadium by 7% capacity. So it's only 7,000 fans. So less than half of what's going to be at Arrowhead are going to be at the Broncos Stadium.
I mean, it's hard to imagine that anybody would feel comfortable in just being with 15,000 people right now. But I mean, I guess, these stadiums are kind of outdoors, so maybe that helps. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. They're not doing a bubble. The league has said that a bubble format just isn't feasible given like the size of the roster, all the equipment and the space they need. So we'll see. I hope they can pull it off better than Major League Baseball has been able to.
Carlo, I'm glad you mentioned all of that, because this is going to be a really huge true test for sports right now in the COVID world, because Major League Baseball at the first month or so really had some hard times, especially with the Miami Marlins, the Philadelphia Phillies as well, where players were contracting the coronavirus. And baseball, not as much as a human-to-human contact sport as football is. We've seen how successful the bubble has been for the NBA, because we've seen basically no players test positive for the virus. But the NFL is a whole nother beast. You have much larger rosters. You have players who are literally having to touch each other, all of this. So nobody really knows how this is all going to work out.
We shall see.
But either way, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's something to watch, right? I'm not a huge NFL fan, but I respect I respect those who are, which is basically everybody.
Yes, Carlo, I'm just happy for something on television. That's all I care about.
Yes, that we can agree on. All right, we're way over here. Let's end it. Thank you guys for indulging me, and Baker, you as well. That is what you need to know for Thursday, September 10th. We'll see you tomorrow.